Hey y'all, Spud here from Three Dots Downtown. Thanks for tuning in to the Center Film Festival. We hope you guys are enjoying yourselves. We here at Three Dots Downtown exist to amplify culture and support creativity all around the region, and so we are super excited to be partnering with the Center Film Festival this weekend. Last year, November of 2019, we actually helped fund the inaugural Center Film Festival, and so we are super excited to see them returning this year and pivoting into the virtual space. At Three Dots Downtown, despite the fact that our physical space is closed because of COVID, we continue to give out these $1,000 grants every month to people in our community that have ideas to make the town a more vibrant place. So we would love to fund your creativity and your ideas. If you've got an idea or a project that you want to see get off the ground, we'd love to give you $1,000 to give you the encouragement to get a go at it. So go ahead and check out our site at threedotsdowntown.com, and you can learn more about the grant program. And coming up in December, on December 15th, we'll be having a live event on Facebook giving our final grant of the year out. And so be sure to tune in on that. Go check out the Three Dots Downtown social media pages to learn more about that event. And if you want to get your idea in the running for that grant, we would love to consider it. So hope you have a great rest of the festival, and we hope to see you soon when our space reopens at some point down the road. Take care, friends, and have a good weekend.
Hello and welcome back, everybody, to our live Q&As. What I'm going to do real quick is just introduce myself. My name is Pearl Gluck. I am the co-founder and artistic director of the Center Film Festival. This is our second year, and absolutely not what we imagined it would be. I wish you could meet all of these incredible people, the filmmakers, our hosts, our sponsors, in person. But unfortunately, as we all know, we are virtual to keep everyone safe. The advantage is that we have people calling in from all over the country. They'll talk a little about where they're from Texas to LA to New York and State College and Center County. So at least we get to meet people that may have had a difficult time getting here because they're working on new projects, wouldn't have been able to come and talk to you in person. So we're so grateful to have all of you here today. I will tell you that I have been on a panel with Nefertiti Nguvu, so you're definitely in for a treat. I've been on a panel with Yaki Smith in, where were we, Waco, Texas. Their work is incredible. Yoruba Richen's work is incredible too, as I'm sure you'll agree, because hopefully you've just watched the film. If you haven't watched the film yet, that's okay. You'll be watching this after, and you'll be hearing this conversation. You can always email us comments or any questions and see if we could forward them. But you can certainly ask them right now in chat down here. So Yoruba's the only one I haven't met in person yet, but her work speaks obviously for herself. And Jason and I met here in State College, Pennsylvania. He's a local activist, and he is also one of the board members, I think a founding board member, am I right, of Three Dots Downtown?
That's correct, yes.
Yep, which you just heard Spud Marshall talking about. So I'm just going to go back there behind the curtain, as they say, and let this conversation begin. I love each and every one of these films. And I know that you do or will love them as soon as you watch them. This conversation will be super inspiring. So thank you so much to all of you, and we'll see you at the other end of the conversation.
Thank you, Pearl. Thank you so very much. Welcome, everybody, to Ripple Effect. We have three wonderful filmmakers. I had the opportunity to watch these films, and there is some depth there. There is some insight. There are some beautiful shots and beautiful scenes, and we're going to dig into that today. So first to the stage, I want to bring up Yaki Smith. Yaki Smith, known for his unflinching and voracious style of storytelling, rising voice of independent cinema. His films have received worldwide acclaim, screening and winning awards at over 100 film festivals. So at home, I want y'all to give it up for Yaki Smith, people. Everybody, please. Yaki Smith. That's right. And the film that you would have watched is Brother. I'll be. How you feeling, Yaki?
I'm feeling good.
Nice. Sounds good, man. And where you calling in from? Where you calling in from?
I'm calling in from Austin, Texas. I'm actually a professor at UT Austin.
Sounds good. Next up, we have Nefertiti Nguvu. She recently made her television debut, helming a season 2 episode of BET's original series Tales. She has also written, produced, and directed several narrative shorts, I Want You, The End of Winter, and many, many, many more. Please welcome to the stage Nefertiti Nguvu. Everybody, round of applause at your households right now. Round of applause, please. And how are you doing, Nefertiti? How's it going?
I'm doing great. Thanks.
And where you calling in from?
I'm actually in Atlanta working, so I'm in a little corporate apartment.
Sounds good, Nefertiti. Thank you so much for being here, and can't wait to talk about your film as well. And last but not least, Yoruba Richen. She's a documentary filmmaker who's created the documentary specialization at the Newmark J School. Her work has been featured on PBS, New York Times, OpDoc, and many others. She was chosen for the Root 100 list for the most influential African-American 45 and under, recognizing her as a leader whose, quote, work from the past here is breaking down barriers and paving the way for the next generation. Please welcome to the stage, Yoruba Richen. Yoruba, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And where are you calling in from?
I'm calling from Brooklyn, New York.
Brooklyn, New York. All right, let's bring everybody out to the stage real quick. Everybody, this is the amount of the storytelling that you were able to accomplish in the short amount of time in these films is astounding. So before we get started, I just want to toss out a question to everybody. This is called ripple effect. So in your own words, why do you think Brother, The Sit-In, and Myself When I Am Real, why do those films fit under this theme of ripple effect? Let's start with you, Yaki. You're muted, Yaki.
My bad.
It's okay.
I think you're muted is like the mantra for this season, right? Everybody's always muted. If you've watched the film and even if you haven't, I mean, it's about a young man who becomes influenced by his racist brother. And you see how small little sort of microaggressive things that he does to manipulate his brother end up having a complete ripple effect on the relationship with his best friend, on his psyche. And you can see at the end of the film that ultimately he will never be the same again because of this interaction that he's had. And it really does ask that question, like, can he recover from this? Or will this have such a ripple effect that he will go down a path that he cannot recover from?
Gotcha. Thank you, Yaki. Nefertiti, what's your perspective on the ripple effect? And give a little bit of background on your film as well, where you describe it.
Okay, so my film, Myself When I'm Real, is about the family members of someone who was murdered by the police, and their sort of path of like healing and trying to deal with the toll of this loss. So I'm assuming I'm in the ripple effect because of, the way that not only these police murders affect, the individuals whose lives are taken, but it just has this ripple effect that we don't think about amongst the entire family, amongst a community. And so when one life is taken, it affects so many lives. And I wrote this film after the death of Erica Garner, who's the daughter of Eric Garner. And I was just I was so incredibly distraught when I read about her death, because I felt certain that her father's death had something to do with, the quality of life and her life, and how, her activism, and just, the sheer heartbreak and just the anger and just like all the things that you experience when someone is taken away from you. But just to add to that, the unfair, the circumstances that they're taken away from you under. And I just, it just made me think so much about these families that, we don't see, the brothers, the sisters, the daughters. And just like my heart just broke for them in so many ways. I just felt like I know how I feel when I read about these things, but I just can't imagine being the sister, the brother, the daughter of someone who this has happened to, and trying to negotiate those feelings. So.
Thank you for that, Nefertiti. We'll dig a little bit more into some of the topics and the themes that you talked about as we continue on. But to level set, just to continue on, Yoruba, the ripple effect. Give a little bit of background about your film, The Sit-In, and how the ripple effect is connected to your film.
Yeah, so my film, The Sit-In, the full name is The Sit-In. Harry Belafonte hosts The Tonight Show. And it's about the week in 1968 that artist, activist, entertainer extraordinaire Harry Belafonte took the reins from Johnny Carson, who was the host of The Tonight Show, and took the reins from from Johnny and hosted The Tonight Show for a week in 1968. And it was the first time an African-American had hosted for a straight week a late night show. And it was in the midst of a year, 1968, that is very much reminiscent of today and what we're going through. A divisive election was on the horizon with that resulted in the election of Richard Nixon. Riots and rebellions had taken over the streets following the continued because of continued police violence. The Vietnam War was in full throttle, and Harry took over The Tonight Show and had these amazing artists and activists from who were his friends and his colleagues, everybody from Lena Horne and Diane Carroll, Aretha Franklin, and of course his good friend, Dr. King. It was Dr. King's last televised interview, and Robert Kennedy he had on as well. And it was one of Robert Kennedy's last televised interviews. So I think the ripple is the political context that we are still dealing with today. 68 was very much a time of backlash to the civil rights movement, to gains that African Americans and women had been making. And it's a backlash that we're still feeling today. That ripple effect is still with us today. And then also, Harry was one of the first people to really put on late night to talk about issues and politics and hard stuff to talk about. And he was one of the first to do it, certainly the first African-American to do it. And then, really setting the stage, I think, for the confluence of late night and politics that we see, with so many shows. So that's also the ripple effect.
Gotcha. Thank you so very much for that. One thing I do want to point out, I watched them in the order of Yakis, the Nefertitis, and then the Cid and Yoruba is the last one. And it seemed to me like there was this perfect evolution of the microaggression situation between just a few between a family and friends, and it elevated into what that could turn into on a larger scale. If that continues to exist in our communities unchecked, it leads to the ripple effect related to murders. And after that, then the community gets involved, and then you have someone on the Harry Belafonte level who is able to then bring up these topics in a way that reshape the way that we think of late night entertainment and discourse at that time. And it's so relevant how that progression went. So kudos to Pearl for putting in that order, but I want to say thank you to all of you for bringing up such important topics. Let's go back to you, Yaki. Brother, it's short, it's powerful, it leaves nothing behind. Let's start with this question. So I love the fact that it's called The Brothers, because it's like you could be my brother, but you're not my brother, because you're not my brother, but you're my brother. And there's so many different layers to it at the same time. I love it. But the real brothers, the two white brothers, they seem to have nothing in common throughout the entire film, except for the fact that they are from the same family and they're from the same race. And we all know the phrase is that phrase, blood is thicker than water. So especially when it comes to bias, do you think that that's true, and how do you show that in the film?
Well, I mean, I don't want to sound too pessimistic, but I mean, what we have seen during the last 4 years of this regime is this notion, that blood is thicker than water. And what I mean by that is you have seen factions of, white Americans get together and decide yet again. And we have to remember, Trump didn't start this. That's another thing. We oftentimes act as though Trump, for some reason, started racism. No, he is but a sort of symptom of a much larger issue. And so you have seen white Americans come out of the woodworks, those who have silently been racist, those who have behind closed doors created policies, behind closed doors did everything in their power to keep wealth, to keep education, to keep opportunities from Black folks. And so when we start to think about this whole notion of people coming together, quite honestly, for some reason, we see this. Now, I'm not saying we don't have allies, right? There are white allies. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, like-minded people, and sadly, oftentimes, like-minded people are of the same race sometimes, right? They get together and they are sort of in some ways perpetuating a lot of these things that we're seeing. And in the film, I think one of the big things, to your point, they have absolutely nothing in common, but this brother reveres him. This brother wants him to be proud of him. This brother wants to make sure that ultimately that his older brother loves him. And so in his mind, he has to, in some ways, do whatever it is that his brother wants him to do. Sorry, I got a kid now with me. Do everything that his brother wants him to do. And that's what he ultimately does, even at his own detriment. Because I think at the end of the film, he has done something so horrible, but in some ways, it's happened in such a sly way that he doesn't even realize he's done it until after it's done. It's not like he woke up one day and said he was going to do this today. It was the small, little, microaggressive things that his brother did that took him to where he ultimately went. And I think at the end of that film, he's done something that, one, he never planned to do, but he's also done something that has left an indelible stain, and I'm not sure if he can ever recover from it.
Thank you, Yaki. Let's hop over to Nefertiti. You brought up a couple good points, Yaki, though. Community and something that you can never recover from. And those are two themes that I see inside myself when I am real. So let's talk about the community portion of it. I feel like the conflict between the couple is a sampling of something found in many communities, like that conflict that's happening between the two. How is the couple's struggle similar to various communities of color, or not, or anybody for that, here in the United States? How is that conflict representative of the communities here in the U.S.?
Well, I honestly, when I was writing about them, I was really thinking about interiors. Okay. I think often one of the things I try to really make a central focus of my work is like the interior life of Black people, because I feel like oftentimes when our lives are depicted, because of all of the horrific things that we have to deal with, our stories are about sort of like these external things that are thrown at us, that we have to live through and adapt with and fight against, which are very real and ever present. But I find that I long to see films about our lives that tell stories in the way that I see films that I love, like Ingmar Bergman's films or Andrei Tarkovsky's films, where they're really about the interior lives of their characters. And so when I wrote Myself When I Am Real, I honestly, I was thinking more so about the interior lives of these two people, and just like how this experience, this grief, this trauma, essentially, that they have experienced, how it's going to play out in their lives, how it's going to play out in their marriage, and how it's going to play out in the way that they sort of like negotiate moving forward with the rest of the world.
Gotcha. And so to your point about that relationship and the death of that brother, the death of the brother is a powerful part of the story, yet the tension between the couple doesn't seem to be completely rooted within his murder, though. It's his brother's murder. Is his brother's murder the reason for the marriage and that conflict that we're seeing, or are there other layers on top of that you're trying to expose here?
There's certainly other layers. I think that this trauma has been sort of like the ripping of the Band-Aid off of other layers that they're sort of experiencing within the marriage. One of the things I get at is like, the difference in their backgrounds, like the husband, the brother who's the husband whose brother was murdered comes from a sort of affluent family. So this is the first time he's really ever had to deal with, or not the first time, but this is the first time that this sort of reality of being what it means to be a Black man in America has ever sort of like kicked him in the neck in this way. You know what I mean? And so I think because of his sense of privilege, he's sort of not had to deal with, he sort of looked at, he's the type of person, like he sees these things on the news and where he may have some sympathy, it never occurred to him that this is something that he would personally have to deal with. and his partner, his wife, comes from a very different experience. And so part of what their conflict is that she is judging the way that he's reacting to this, because it's like all of a sudden he has really been thrown into the really difficult reality of what it means to be a Black person in America.
Thank you, Nefertiti. And speaking of a Black person understanding the reality of America, Harry Belafonte, one of the most popular African-American artists, actors around that time, singers and performers, he was very in tune to the Black community struggle and what was going on around. He was able to take a stance and use his position on the Harry Belafonte, on the Tonight Show during that week. So first of all, I just have to know, you look way younger than someone who might have seen this on TV. So how were you inspired to tell this story about Harry Belafonte?
Yes, I am indeed way younger than someone who saw this in real time. So I was approached by the producers of the film, and one of the producers is a woman named Joan Walsh, who writes for The Nation. And she wrote an article about this week, when she discovered this week. She wrote an article about this week about 3 years ago, and discovered, that this week had happened. She didn't know about. She was surprised because her parents were big, Johnny Carson fans. She was a big Harry Belafonte fan, and she always felt that it should be a documentary. And she brought on Joy Reid, who's an executive producer of the film, and they brought on another producer, Valerie Thomas, who set out to find a director who, could jive with the material and wanted to make this film. And as soon as they told me about it and they approached me and we met, I was immediately intrigued precisely because I hadn't heard of this week. Mm-hmm. And someone who considers myself pretty up on, African-American entertainment history, especially, I was immediately interested because this was such a monumental week that many folks did not know about. And I love telling stories that, haven't been told before, or that have been, only a little bit is known about the subject matter. And it seemed it was an opportunity to explore so many different themes, entertainment, activism, the individual people like Harry Belafonte and Lena Horne and Aretha Franklin through the lens of this one week. It was a great opportunity to reach out and have all these story tentacles while telling the story of this.
No, I agree with the story tentacles, because as I was watching the film, I kept thinking I kept thinking, oh, this is a great Harry Belafonte film. And then I was like, no, Jason, it's about the week. It's about how impactful this week was. So in your mind, if you had to share in like a tweet what you think the sit-in is about, what would you say? Because there's so much depth to this. Like, what is the sit-in about?
Well, before I answer that, I just want to say that when I started this film, I too was like, okay, this is not a Harry Belafonte film. This is about the week. But then, and this is where the tweet may come in, I would say this is about the week that Harry Belafonte took over the Tonight Show in the tumultuous times of 1968, and that it is also about how Harry viewed this time period, viewed what was going on in this country, and was able to bring that to mainstream America on this, one of the most popular television shows at the time.
Thank you, Yoruba. So one of the things that I took away from that, and bring everybody on the screen, I want to ask everybody this question real quick. As a radio host, that's the story of Harry Belafonte really spoke to me of the importance that we all play in the entertainment realm of sharing the stories, communicating the stories in a way, encouraging those who have a microphone to be able to share it effectively. So right now, this is to all of you. How important is it right now for people who have the ability to speak up and to share their voice to do so? And how would you encourage them to do so? Let's start with you, Nefertiti.
I mean, I think that we're living through very critical times. And I think that the stakes are incredibly high for all of us. And so, but I do think that it's really important for people who organically feel sort of inclined to do those things, do them. And I think for those of us who have a political awareness and a conscientiousness, I think I do it in terms of the art that I create, and I hope that the art that I create is able to be a conversation piece and is able to encourage people who might not have thought about things like the subject matter of this film and the lives that are being taken away senselessly. It will encourage them to participate in those conversations and to do something to act. You know, I think that I'm sort of unique in that I come from a family of activists. I'm from Newark, New Jersey. My dad was in Amiri Baraka's organization. So, and I sort of like grew up with this sense of art being sort of like a central sort of part of a political struggle. So I think that that's always been sort of ingrained in me, but I understand that that's not necessarily where everyone comes from. So I think that there is, you know, sort of like a natural progression in one's life. But I think what we are living through is so extraordinary that even if that's not your natural inclination, like we're at the point in time, at a point in history, which is like, what is that saying? Like, it is time for all good men to come to the aid of the party. Like it's like all hands on deck right now. You know what I mean? And I feel like it's time for everyone to participate in the best way that, you know, they know how, and the best way that they can, because we're critical. We're in critical times.
Makes sense. Yaki, your perspective on encouraging folks to use the creative methods to share their voice. Thoughts?
Yeah, it's interesting, Nefertiti, that you mentioned Amiri Baraka, because there's a quote from him that, you know, really speaks to me whenever I think about our duty as creatives, you know, and it is the artist's role is to raise the consciousness of the people. And I think it is so important, to your point of it, this is a critical time. And I think what we are witnessing, to be honest with you, is in some ways almost a symptom of people not using their voices for change, right? We have oftentimes walked through the earth, right, wanting to be just entertained by film, wanting to be entertained by art, not really thinking that we should be the ones to speak out, that we shouldn't be the ones to say the thing, that somebody else will do it. And what we're seeing now, right, is in some ways, again, a symptom of that ideology. And I think for us, all of us who are artists, whatever kind of art that you create, if it's film, if you're painting, if you're writing, if you're DJing, whatever it is that you're doing, I think it is so important to not just raise the consciousness of the people, but really to like pull the wool off, because we have operated with the wool on our faces. We have turned our backs to the things that have really ailed us for so long. And I think it's so important that we stop doing that. You know, one of the things I always tell my students is that there is so much, and I'm gonna just say it how I say it to them. There's so much garbage out there in the world, and you don't want to add to that, right? You have the ability to make a film. You got to remember, when somebody sits down in a theater, and even if they're at their house, the lights go off, they're watching your film, that is connecting to their spirit, right? And you have an opportunity to do one or two things. You can open them up. You can open up their eyes. You can make them see the world in a way that they've never seen it. Or, right, you can in some ways continue to allow them to be numbed, right? And I think there's a way to entertain people. And I said this yesterday. There's a way to take the medicine and put it in the cupcake, right? I'm watching something that's entertaining, but in the end, I have been so affected by that thing that I've experienced it, that I walk out and I am forever changed. And I think that's our responsibility, because if we're not doing that, as Nina Simone said, then what is the point of any of this?
Yeah, Key, when you come out with your T-shirts with the medicine and the cupcake, let me know. I would like to have the first one. I like to have the first T-shirt. All
I
right,
got you.
sounds good. Yoruba, though, this is so on point with what Harry Belafonte was able to accomplish, pulling the wool off of people's eyes while he had that week, that one opportunity. And many of the images that you show in your film are very reminiscent. They're almost the same things that we're seeing on the news today. But Tonight Show back in the day was the show. That was the one show everybody watched. So the amount of impact you could create by having somebody pulling the wool off was fairly significant. So my question to you is that, are we able to create a similar level of social influence in our current social media environment? What do you think, Yoruba?
Yeah, I just also want to address a couple of things that
Sure.
both the other guests have said so beautifully and so well. First of all, I think that, the medicine in the cupcake, that is kind of how we as documentary filmmakers approach our work. A lot of times what we are talking about are social justice issues, are educational, but we always want to be entertaining and interesting and engaging. So that medicine in the cupcake metaphor, I think, really works for documentary filmmakers.
I'm telling you, Yoruba, we got to get those T-shirts.
Yes,
we got to get a T-shirt.
Ready. Also, too, it's funny that I'm going to bring up Amiri Baraka again as well. And my as Nefertiti, growing up, I grew up with a mother who was a playwright and a political playwright, colleagues and friends with Amiri. They were in the same Black arts movement. And so for me as well, arts and entertainment were always intertwined. And that's how I, came to this medium, to filmmaking. So it's really part and parcel of what I do. And I will say that we have had, we've also had a long history of arts and entertainment. I'm working on a film now that looks at some of the work of Paul Robeson and Lena Horne and Nina Simone, as Yake just mentioned. So that has always been a part. And Paul Robeson was one of the influencers of Harry Belafonte, one of the models of how you mix art and being an entertainer with being an activist and fighting for the betterment of your people, of our people. So that's, I think, a very strong tradition in the African-American community. And then on the other hand, I also want to point out, because another panel that I was on recently also was asking some similar questions about how in today's climate do we, can we speak out? Is it the duty, as Nina said, is it the responsibility of the artist to speak out? And I just want to say, because we had, especially in this recent election, we've had some entertainers who speak out, and their speaking out is an endorsement or a shout out to a certain candidate. But I really think we also need to be, when we look at the models of a Robeson or a Belafonte or a Nina Simone, what we are looking at, and activists today, artist activists today, are not just a one-time, last minute endorsement or saying you should vote for this person or that person, but really who are the artist activists that are deeply engaged in this work, are deeply working on, from behind the scenes around, we saw it around voting rights, around, all kinds of different issues. And I think we have to separate those artist activists from, other artists who are in it for a minute or who may shout out a candidate, but are not deeply engaged in the work. So we have to make that distinction. And in terms of today, how we can, you're right, during the Tonight Show, there were only 3 channels. So I remember that. I think when I was growing up, there were maybe 4. But obviously now it's a different thing. And, social media is it's a blessing and a curse, right? As we all know, it's a way that people have been able to capture crimes, criminal activity. Yes. They've been able to, articulate a movement. So important, right? But at the same time, it's also been this very real message of hate and disinformation. So I think that we're going to have to restructure our media you know, in a way that meets the times, right? We used to have something called the Fairness Doctrine, which they got rid of. And it was an FCC mandate that if you had one opinion in a news, you know, in a news, in a news report, you have to have a balanced opinion on the other hand. And, you know, it's principles like that, I think, that would help us get back to a more, a less opinionated news world, and where you literally have channels and news organizations that are spouting one opinion and spouting misinformation. And until we break through that and restructure how things are, and that includes on Facebook and Twitter and all that, I think we're gonna continue to be in a trouble, and, you know, leads to what we're seeing today around you know, misinformation and stuff like that. So
I got you. One of the things that I to this point, you just reminded me of a project that I think is called Pass the Mic or Share the Mic, where individuals who were who had the floor, just like who's the Tonight Show original host?
Johnny Carson.
Johnny Carson. Just like Johnny Carson gave the floor to Harry Belafonte, there were a number of folks over this past year who gave up their social media platforms to others to share an experience from an opposite side. So share the mic, pass the mic, very closely related to, but all of those points are very, very valid. But to your point of like this the divisiveness that occurs. Now, let's go back to you, Yaki. This past election showed that there's a definitive divisiveness and differences in ideology. Yet the ending of Brother shows something less definitive. Like this, the expression on the younger brother's face is one that I thought it was so well done, and you captured it for just the right amount of time for you to understand like there's conflict there. So why, with all this divisiveness that is so clear and sharp, why end on a note that's like conflicted and not so certain?
Well, because I think, you know, when we start to think about like, you know, racism and hatred and just all of these isms, right, that we can throw out, to be honest with you, these things are learned, right? Nobody comes out of the womb saying, oh, I'm gonna be racist, I'm gonna hate this person, right? It is so baked into the DNA of our country, though, that by age, sometimes 5 or 6, people are picking up on these things, right? And in some ways, if we could stop it then, right? This thing happened and I'm going to stop it right then, we could probably begin to change the course of things, right? But that's not what happens. Usually when the thing happens, you usually have a teacher who believes the same racist thing or the same sexist thing or the same homophobic thing. And what they do is they continue again to speak that negativity and that divisiveness into these young people. And before you know it, you got an 18, 19-year-old kid going into a church and blowing people away because he hates black folks, right?
Yeah.
And that he didn't start that way, right? Somebody groomed him. And I think that's the thing that we really have to think about. And I think with the brother at the end, it has happened. And to be honest with you, if somebody could come in and snuff it out right then, he could probably change. But it's not going to happen. His brother is there. His brother is the influence. His brother is going to continue to speak this hateful ideology into him. And before you know it, in a year, he could do that same exact thing and not even care about it and eat a cupcake after he's done with doing it. But right now, he's conflicted because there is a good part of him. And that good part of him is now being slowly damaged and turned into something much more evil by his brother. And so that's another thing. You know, I didn't want to leave it with this whole notion that, oh, he was born bad or he was born evil, he was born racist. No. These things are slowly being taught to him. And if they continue to be taught to him, we end up with what we're seeing now.
It's such a powerful statement made in such a short amount of time. And now that you're making this up, you give the audience those moments of like pause, like the moments where there could be that intervention. You see it like almost want to happen, and then it doesn't. And if it happened early on, like if it happened within the first instance that it occurred, you wouldn't need even the rest of the movie because you nipped it in the butt right away. But it's such a beautiful artistic way of showing that. Speaking of beautiful and artistic, Nefertiti, I gotta know myself when I am real. Two questions from an artistic point of view. Why did you choose black and white? And two, tell us what the timeline actually is, because that to me makes a big deal. Like, is the ending scene actually at the end, or does it come before? So break that down for me, black and white, in the actual timeline.
Well, first I want to say my dear friend, cinematographer Hans Charles, shot the film, and I think his work on it is just exquisite. I decided to shoot it, whenever I make any decisions about like what something is going to look like visually, I'm always sort of working backwards from the emotional intention of the story that I'm trying to tell, and like what I feel would be sort of like the most succinct way to communicate whatever emotional information that I want the audience to understand. And so I felt like because this piece deals in some subconscious terrain, like there's dreams and just like memories and all these things, I felt like the black and white for me felt more accurate in terms of how to sort of like unveil that emotional terrain. You know what I mean? I felt like I wanted to tell the story in the way that I feel like memory works for a lot of us. It's like, I know when I'm remembering things, like it's never really in the right order. You know what I mean? It's like you feel sort of like the things that, it just sort of happened. Like you remember like sort of like intuitively, like what things felt like, and like what, the things that felt most severe are the things that feel most prevalent in your mind. Whereas like it might not have exactly happened that way, but that's the way that it felt. You know what I mean? And so that's, I felt like I wanted, for me to tell the story and for it to sort of feel the way that I think that emotional memory works. I felt like black and white was sort of an accurate way to do that. And it's the reason why the film does sort of like manipulate and play with time again, because of, the way that I feel like memory happens and memory works, particularly around issues of trauma. It doesn't always unfold accurately or in sort of like a narrative, time sequence. It sort of unfolds the way you remember it in your heart, and the way that you remember things sort of like affecting you. So that's sort of it. I hope I answered your question.
You completely did.
Okay.
I watched your film like 3 times. I was like, wait, hold on. I just caught something else. Wait, when did that happen? Oh my goodness. So like, I just had to ask because I was going through like 3 scenarios in my own head. So everybody, thank you so very much for hopping in here today. You've had the films that you've been able to create, and I know you have so much more in your catalog, but the 3 films at this film festival are impactful, they're timely, they connected with me, and hopefully they connected with everyone else out there. So before we get out of here, I want to give the floor to each of you to share anything else about your current film, anything that you're working on coming up, or any last thoughts that you want to say about where we're at as a creative spot and where we're at as a society. Let's start with you, Yoruba, and let's work our way back.
Well, thank you so much. It was great to be in conversation with both of you, and I really look forward to seeing your films. They sound amazing. I just want to say, I'll do the brazen self-promotion by
please do.
My next film is going to be premiering on January 18th on PBS's American Masters, and similar but different themes. It's called How It Feels to Be Free, and it looks at 6 African-American female entertainers from the 40s till today, and how they reshaped representation on screen for Black women, and really set the stage for the renaissance of Black storytelling that we're seeing today.
Awesome. Thank you, Yoruba. Nefertiti, what are you up to? Give us a last lowdown. Anything else you want to leave us with?
I honestly, I think my last words will just be in terms of, this moment that we are here in time. I would just encourage, folks that are watching to continue to do things like this, to seek out the work of independent filmmakers, to support independent filmmakers, to look beyond, what's sort of like in our dominant paradigm, and like what are the things that are sort of like being thrown at us, but just to seek out work like this, and to participate in the ways that you can, and the healing of our folks, you know, and the healing of like this moment in time. And so that's sort of like my last spiel. I'm like, the thing that I'm working on now, I'm like, I have no idea when it's going to come out. So
Fair enough. Thank you so much, Nefertiti. Yaki.
Yeah, so I'm gonna do the sort of selfless promotion too, but
Please get it, man.
I actually have another film screening in this festival called The Pandemic Chronicles. It's an anthology series that I shot during the pandemic, and it'll be screening tomorrow, I believe. So come and check that out. And then I'm working on my next feature right now. We're kind of in, I should say, development hell. That's how this always works, right? Just trying to get the money together, trying to figure out what it's going to be, because my last feature was shot in 2012, and it's time for me to make a new one. So I'm right now trying to figure out what that's going to be. And then I'm working on some television stuff as well, just trying to get my foot in every sort of arena that I can in terms of film, because I also know that TV is the future, right? Or it is the now, I will say. And I feel like some of the most interesting things that I've been watching have been on television. And so I really want to dive into that space. So that's what I got going.
Awesome. Yaki, Nefertiti, Yoruba, thank you so very much. Before we get out of here, though, I want to bring back in Pearl Gluck to wrap things up for all of us. Pearl, these filmmakers are amazing. I'm humbled to be in their presence, so thank you. I appreciate it.
You're on mute, Pearl.
I'm gonna get a T-shirt that says you're muted. That's what we need.
This is our 5th or 6th Q&A. You'd think I'd have it down. And plus, we've been teaching in Zoom for so long that you think we'd have it. What I said is I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, of course. And, you know, I'm so glad, Jason, that you asked about what ripple effect might mean for each of the filmmakers. You know, we spent a lot of time looking at films and bringing in these particular films and these particular filmmakers to have a certain kind of conversation as part of our festival that is effective locally. It's affected everywhere. And we're using the, hi again. He was on our red carpet, weren't you? Oh, nice to see the car. And we're using the platform that we had to pivot to have an opportunity to have deeper conversations for longer periods of time. Usually you got to rush from one film to another when you're at a film festival and you're torn between what to watch. So I'm hoping that this was as impactful for you as it was for me. Jason, thank you so much for hosting. Yoruba, Nefertiti, Yaki, thanks for being here. We're going to have a conversation next on seeking resolution, looking at films coming from different countries and seeing how they deal with whether it's activism. Excuse me. There's one on the FARC rebels and a crime that occurred to an international student here in the United States. So we're just going to continue to have these conversations. I don't have to ask you twice to look into Yaki's work, Nefertiti's work, and Yoruba's. I know you will. So once again, we love having
Pearl, right now, Yaki's getting attacked by a very cute kid. I'm sorry. I have to bring attention to this. So I know that you're trying to outro, but the world needs to make sure that we.
Yeah.
What's up, man? What's your name?
What's your name? Zuberi.
Zuberi. Another Zuberi.
I'm sorry, Pearl. I had to. Go ahead.
Let's ask him what kind of question do you want us to ask you? What's your favorite movie?
What's your favorite movie? What's your favorite movie?
Monster.
He likes monster movies. We're watching The Nightmare Before Christmas over and over and over again.
Oh, Gary.
Well, I'm sorry, but Yaki, I'm totally using your child's answer, which was very insightful, that we have kid films too. So in fact, Yaki, you should play it for him from all over the world through the New York International Children's Film Festival. Anyway, I just want to thank all of you for being here. I love our additional panelists now. And we look forward to our next conversation. And we really hope to be able to host you right here in Center County next year and meet you all in person. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.